happy Black History Month. We are 5 days into Black History Month. And today, the topic of conversation is becoming indispensable in an uncertain market. And we will have Angelina Darrisaw, who is the CEO and founder of C-Suite Coach, lead the conversation with Floyd Williams and Sheereen Russell. She will introduce our speakers today. And before we get going, I just want to introduce myself and in my role for the New York Urban League. But I also have to acknowledge that I play a dual role because I'm also part of the C-Suite family and a coach for C-Suite Coach. But today I am here with you all as the Diversity and Inclusion Project Manager for the New York Urban League. And one of the things I encourage all of you to become a part of is our NYUL Connect talent portal. Here we seek to attract job seekers, career seekers, and this conversation is very relevant, and this partnership with C-Suite Coach is also very relevant because we're looking to connect with all of you as professionals who are navigating your careers, growing in your careers, and also looking to gain professional development, learning development, insights from conversations such as the one that we're going to have today. So I will share in the chat how you can access NYUL Connect. It is free. And on the portal, we share job opportunities, mentorship opportunities, ways that you can connect with one another, and then also how you can continue to connect to conversations like today. So with that, Angelina, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Sandy, and thanks for having us back with New York Urban League. Hi, everyone. It's so great to see you. Really glad to be here. I'm Angelina Darrisaw, and I'm the founder and CEO of C-Suite Coach. C-Suite Coach is a 9-year-old talent development agency, and we build programs that are focused on building more inclusive leaders and better leaders with our vision focused on making career advancement and equity in the workplace a reality for all. So one of the ways in which we like to connect is to have these C-Suite Coach chats. We are having one every other month this year with New York Urban League. And we bring together one of our C-Suite coaches and an executive to share their perspective on something topical. What is more topical right now than being indispensable in today's work market, workplace? It's a challenging time. We're hearing about lots of challenges, and we have the right people to discuss this with us. So I'd like to introduce Sheereen Russell, who's the EVP of Ad Sales and Client Partnerships and Inclusive Content Solutions for Warner Brothers Discovery. Sheereen Russell is a seasoned media executive and executive vice president in ad sales and inclusive content monetization. In her current role, she's responsible for driving sales, educating marketers, and developing content and database solutions to engage brands and consumers across the Warner Brothers Discovery portfolio of cable, social, and digital platforms. She also leads efforts to deliver on their commitments to diversity and inclusion in front of and behind the camera, while partnering closely with programming and merchandising teams across all platforms to develop diverse and inclusive content and sponsorship opportunities. Furthermore, Ms. Russell has received numerous industry accolades, including being honored by Synopsys Top Women in Media in 2023 and many more awards over the last 5 years. So I want to thank you for being here, Sheereen. And I'd also like to introduce Floyd Williams, the executive coach with us representing C-Suite Coach. Floyd has over 20 years of executive coaching experience. He's an accomplished trainer, author, storyteller, and speaker. He draws on his success both as a former C-suite executive and business owner, and he's mastered the ability to coach leaders and teams to uncover and remove barriers that impede organizational success. He combines his practical experience with empirical, evidence-based coaching methodologies to help unlock his clients' greatest human potential to experience self-satisfaction, happiness, fulfillment, and freedom in their lives. That sounds like the recipe, Floyd. We all want that. And as a result of his great work, he was named the U.S. Small Business Administration Business Coach of Georgia. Welcome, Floyd.
Thank you.
Well, I'm glad to have you both here. And to get us kicked off, I'd like to begin just talking about some of the things that we're seeing happening in the news right now, which is a lot of companies announcing layoffs, whether in tech or consulting or banking. This has become trending news. So, have you ever been impacted by layoffs? And what strategies did you use to get back on track?
By way of layoffs and impacts, I've been very fortunate that the impact, I shouldn't say fortunate because it's not fortunate. The impact for me has often been in the position of having to have the unfortunate conversation with teammates and those with whom have been on my team and sharing that news and the implications of that. As far as my own personal career trajectory and tenure, I've been fortunate that I have not been directly impacted as far as my role is concerned in the way of being laid off. However, there have been moments of your role's being redirected and or you're taking on more responsibilities or there's other implications. Either way, it's been always emotional, colleagues being impacted or those on the team being impacted. And more importantly, it feels to me unequivocally, Angelina, that we are going to continue, at least in my industry of media, remain in the space of change as the constant sort of frequency and with which we're operating based on all of the advancements, disruption, and overall consumption behaviors that are happening around content right now. And so we're having to reimagine the models and we're having to figure out what's the right way to show up. And we've seen that happen in the music industry. We've seen that happen in the print industry. And we're here now. And so it requires all of us to do more with less, work harder, work faster, be more efficient. And that efficiency also includes in the bottom line and our P&Ls respectively.
Thank you for sharing that, Sheereen. And I'm really glad that you called out that everyone is impacted at layoffs, even if you yourself are not directly being laid off. So, whether that means having to have the conversation with employees or managing the stress and anxiety that can come when layoffs happen in rounds. So, Floyd, in your executive coaching experience, what have you seen be some of the needs for people directly after a layoff, whether they're still with the company or if they have been impacted from a job standpoint?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of psychological emotions that come as a result of being laid off, Angelina. Losing a job can be devastating, as we know, and it can evoke a myriad of emotions. We can just kind of think about, how we would feel if, or how we did feel if when we were laid off. We experience these feelings of shock and maybe anger. Sometimes we're sad, and sometimes we even grieve over these types of losses, and we begin to sort of question our self-worth and feel this sense of failure. Maybe we feel like we let ourselves down, or maybe we feel like we we let the organization down that we represent or work for. These emotions start to trigger, or they can start to trigger even deeper fears like, what did I do about my finances? This financial stress, this immediate loss of income and financial instability can lead to this anxiety to meet our obligations or lack of being able to meet those obligations. This can really polarize us, and it can really impede our cognitive skills for a short period of time. So we know that is these are real emotions that we have to deal with, and we have to address these things. Layoffs also can create a temporary loss of identity for a lot of people because sometimes individuals, they develop a sense of identity from their jobs or their job titles. Think about it. How many times have you maybe asked someone, tell me a little bit about yourself? And they start with, well, I am a engineer, or I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, or I'm a VP at XYZ company. When they lose those titles, they sort of lose a sense of themselves and a sense of belonging, and even some self-esteem. So those are the kind of things that invoke those types of emotions, and layoffs can be devastating. And now it's all about, how do we bounce back from those, Angelina, and how we bounce back from those feelings and emotions.
I'm really glad you brought that up because it does definitely impact our identity and how we feel about ourselves. And I want to ask a follow-up question just on that point. What are some of the steps you can take to rebuilding when you've had that moment happen for you, if you have felt your identity was very tied into your work?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a process. It doesn't happen overnight for most people. But I think it involves taking some time to reflect. I have not been impacted by layoff personally, but my wife was many years ago, like 25 years ago. And what we thought to do, that would be best, and for this recovery process that we're talking about, rebuilding confidence, is to really take some time for self-reflection. Um, I would coach my clients individually to take some time for this self-reflection, to assess their strengths, because they might have shifted and changed over the years, or time period that they've worked in their function. It could be time to take a self-assessment. We're familiar with the self-assessments, but sometimes your personality and your temperament might shift and your skills might shift. So it's a good opportunity to take a new assessment, and recognize where your strengths are, and recognize really that layoffs don't always reflect on you and your ability. Sometimes there's a whole lot of other variables. So often losing the job can really give you opportunity to reflect and really think about, is this a time that I might be liberated from a position or an organization that there's not really organizational fit for me, or personal job fit for me? Sometimes, yeah, it's time to, it might be opportunity to rescue from being somewhere for, too long, and not really having the opportunity to be in that perfect position that's going to support you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's a great point, and what you're calling out just is the reframe, right? A tool that
Yeah.
we use in coaching often, right? So how do we look at what's happening? And that is a skill that you can build with coaching. Something else that you mentioned is thinking about what is that identity and having those goals, setting goals. Another tool I've seen us use often is looking at the wheel of life and how are we positioning our energy. So we can definitely talk more about that. I do want to ask Sheereen a follow-up question, just because one of the things you called out, Sheereen, also was there's so much innovation happening in media, and we're seeing that across many different segments in the market. An article in 2023 said that 7 out of 750 businesses using AI, 37% say technology replaced their workers in 2023. That same article goes on to state 44% of layoffs in 2024 can be attributed to AI efficiencies. So as employees, what steps should we be taking to stay competitive? You have persevered and been extremely competitive as many media changes have happened and innovation. What else should we be thinking about to stay on top of innovation at a time like now?
It's a great question. And I don't pretend to have the most perfect answer, but what I can address, Angelina, is how my approach has been, especially in the space of being in a transactional role where I'm responsible for driving revenue. So ultimately, what I was saying is that I definitely feel as though in my line of work, and consistent in the space of creators and those who create content, the human touch and the human personal imprint changes the overall composition of any dialogue, any content that you're witnessing, any transaction that I'm a part of. It is so built on the ethos, the emotional connection that people feel in that ethos, on top of just sort of how you're able to translate the benefits of an experience that I don't believe, and hope not, that AI can truly replace. Because when I sit with a customer who's about to invest millions of dollars in media on our platform, the dialogue and exchange is so much richer than actually just the solution or the benefit that I'm selling. And it is a history oftentimes of developing a dialogue, having an intimate connection about what drives and motivates that person, both personally as well as professionally, understanding what their KPIs are, but also just understanding what does this mean also in your respective longevity? What does this do for your sustainability within your organization? Oftentimes I say to my partners, how do I help you win as we're building something? And I'm sharing that to simply say that there's a human experience that I really believe when it comes to how we show up in our respective organizations that transforms outcomes, because we have to think about the people with whom are on the other side of that experience, those who are going to be those as theater goers going to see our films, those who are going to be on their sofas watching our content, and those consumers who are going to be motivated to go buy a product because an advertiser put the right message in front of them at the right time. And that is really driven from something I don't believe can always just be put through an algorithm, if you will, and put through the system of AI. And then more importantly, when it comes to people of color, especially, and the implications of making sure that bias does not drive implications on outcomes when it comes to our storytelling, when it comes to our narratives, when it comes to what's going to motivate, again, an audience to go and purchase something. If you aren't leaning into real cultural specificity and nuance around that, then you absolutely cannot win. And if the folks who are creating the AI operation don't look like the majority of the growth markets and targets who are ultimately going to sustain a lot of the consumer experience and behavior, then there's also going to be a radical miss and shift there. So for me, the indispensable sort of nature of what I'm doing is continuing to demonstrate, A, how inclusion monetization is critical for the conversations for all the audiences and consumers who are, who all of our brands are looking to reach, but also in that content experience and making sure there's real resonance. You watch a great movie or a great story and you're lifted, and there's a human connection there. That is the art of storytelling and narrative. And I hope and pray that continues to be how our audiences continue to thrive and see that. But change will come for sure. And as it relates to us and who we are in our respective spaces, the other place that outside of the industry conversation, it's how do you have that unique difference, and what's your edge, and what makes you sharp, what makes you uniquely you. And that also becomes what is your own specificity and nuance that allows you to show up in a room and be unapologetically just you, that cannot be duplicated, cannot be replicated. And the sense of intelligence that you bring to an experience, a room, a conversation, a negotiation, the only way to, I think, really lean in will be with real rich authenticity, because someone has to believe that I can only get that from you. I can only get that skill set from Sheereen, and only Sheereen's going to bring it with that nuance or that imprint of her Southern experience in the South, then migrating to the Northeast, her imprint of her grandmother who's 95 and illiterate and was growing up, in a space of having to be a domestic because she had to work so early. Like that all plays into who I show up as. There's no computer that's going to be able to do that with ease, as far as I'm concerned.
That's great, Sheereen. And there were a lot of nuggets in there that you masterfully dropped on us. One, thinking about how do we stay connected to the revenue, right? That was one piece that I want to make sure isn't lost. To the power of really knowing your strengths, echoing a lot of what Floyd just shared with us about a tool in coaching to be looking at. How do I really get a sense of my strengths and revisit those? And then love the inclusion piece as well. I want to follow up with another media question for you, because media has evolved so much from over-the-top television to being consumed on our phones. Media is accessible really everywhere. As that evolution has occurred, how did you ensure your competitiveness in your line of work with all of the different changes that were happening in the industry?
I think it's being a student of the business and a consumer of the business. And now I will tell you, when it comes to insights and consumer data and seeing where audiences are migrating, understanding which stories have the greatest resonance, understanding where brands are going with what they need to do in order to move products, services, or goods, has really allowed me to migrate through my career with some swift growth and advancement, but also at the same time being anchored in some stable opportunities, and really unequivocally being attached to revenue. I have always been in a space of I'm generating new business opportunities. I'm attached to less of a cost center, but a place where there's revenue coming in. And more importantly, I've always been tapped to how do I find untapped sources of revenue that we're not reaching into. And also really building a wealth of relationship capital and currency. And the beauty of that is it's being able to, again, have access to key decision makers, understand what they need in their business, and then always being able to be a bridge or an answer to a call to action, if you will, for what they need, and leveraging the tools or the resources or the content platforms that I represented for the purposes of delivering against that. And so this is going to sound ever so trite and ever so cliche, but what I would say would also has really just been my people management skill set, Angelina. And that is like tried and true, but it's relationships 101. And how do people think of you when you're not in the room? More importantly, what have you done to service them? how does integrity show up when it comes to you and your name? And more importantly, is there some respect on your name for what you've done and how you show up in business? And I would love to believe and say to you, after nearly 24 years of being in the industry, I feel good about my reputation. I feel good about what I've been able to deliver for partners and brands. And I feel good about how I've represented the brands that I've been responsible for at that time. And they can trust that I'm an ambassador and an evangelist that's going to show up in the room with authority and conviction, as well as close the deal. And so for me, it continues to be about, can I be a closer? Can I drive revenue? And more importantly, how well do I maintain relationship capital for the purposes of advancing whatever platform or business that I work on, and understanding the trends, understanding the demands that are out there, and being able to articulate them for the purposes of, again, monetization where we need it.
You certainly do have an excellent reputation throughout the industry. So one of the names to call on when looking to think about building relationship currency. And I remember my executive coach, I have had one for over 10 years, telling me once, you're never broke when you have social capital. Yet building relationships can be very difficult for all of us, and especially for people of color at work. Floyd, with your executive coaching experiences, what are some of the things that have come up for your clients as they've tried to build relationships and tried to build that strength? And how are some of the ways in which you support them to enhance their indispensability?
Yeah, I think it's the first thing is to really share with my clients the importance of building those relationships and building relationships with people who have influence to help you navigate your career and navigate through situations and support you when it's time for endorsement. So I coach my clients to really be intentional, Angelia, about building relationships with those in leadership roles, and making sure that it's authentic. You want to be able to share information and get advice and build this reciprocity, if you will, as far as what you provide to that relationship and what they give you as well. So it's a process of really cultivating those relationships, and I talk about external and internal relationships of leaders above you and also your peers, because I think Sheereen talked about her brand. And one of the things I always like to encourage my clients to do is to really think about their brand. And what that really means really is not how you perceive yourself, but how others perceive you, and how you show up and be consistent in a favorable way that people will endorse you when it's time to be endorsed. So it's so important to really think about networking and how you do that authentically, and how you do it on a consistent basis, and continue to cultivate relationships around you.
Thank you for that. And what's coming up for me is we're spending some time talking about the impact on the people who are in the job market right now. But what I also think we're experiencing a lot is employees are demanding more of their employers, and that also has an impact on workplace culture right now. So Floyd, I know you consult with a lot of companies as well. Sheereen, you lead large teams. What do you think employers need to know to retain employees? What are they doing even right now in times of uncertainty to create a better experience for employees?
Yeah, I can take take a stab at that. I think it's really important to really retain the best talent, and all companies are looking. They have interest in efforts to retain remarkable, exceptional talent, of course. And the first thing that most companies will probably acquiesce to is a competitive compensation package, which is fine. We definitely know there's some value in offering competitive salaries and benefit packages. That's a fundamental way to retain employees. This includes regular salary increases and bonuses, health care benefits, retirement plans, things of that nature, and even stock options if possible. But in addition to the monetary compensation, there are other ways you can actually attract and retain employees. And one would be, I would say, flexible work arrangements. that's really important to especially the younger generations. In my experience, when I'm coaching, providing flexibility in work arrangements such as remote work and options for flexible hours can really greatly enhance employee satisfaction. This flexibility can be especially attractive during these uncertain economic times, as you've talked about, Angelina. And then professional development opportunities. Uh, employers can really, employers can really invest into people and in their employees, that is, by offering these great training workshops and opportunities for skill development, of course. This not only enhances employee job satisfaction for the employee, but it also increases the value of that employee to the organization. And one of the things that's really big when I'm coaching, and Angelina and Sheereen, is that a lot of my leaders want a clear career path. They want it clear. They want to be able to map out a clear path for their advancement and their opportunity to grow within the company. And many times, there's not clarity, and that really is not good for long-term goals for employer to really be able to establish themselves and know how to move and navigate through their career trajectory. So if there's no real visible, clear runway, many times leaders and talent start to look elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I would say those are some of the major things. Go ahead.
A lot there. Yes. Professional development opportunities certainly matter to employees. In fact, that's one of our post engagement questions that we always ask after working with a company, because the companies want to know, I made this investment. And what employees will say is, I'm thinking about my company more favorably. I'm more likely to stay after they've had a professional development experience. Something else, that you talked about when we think about that professional development is it's a way to upskill the employee. Sheereen, you talked earlier about being a student of the business and a lifelong learner, especially when it comes to building that relationship currency and other knowledge in your industry. What sort of upskilling did you engage in, and what do you recommend in today's market?
I think that's a great question. And for me, when it comes to upskills, believe it or not, one of the first places I think, especially if you're in a space of being in service to client or customers, or even just, as Lloyd pointed out, when it comes to what Floyd mentioned, the folks in your organization, how do you show up and be as engaged and an active listener and really understand the criteria in the room and what is the win? I think a lot of times, I went in as an eager salesperson in the very beginning with like, I have all this to share with you and I need to sell it. And I did less listening to understand, what do you really need, so that I make sure that I'm delivering against that. And the other upskill so the way that's translated for me, even internally, Angelina, would be that I understand in every single space where I am with the key stakeholders, what does the win look like for you? What are your respective KPIs? Because there's often a different narrative, and then there's some shared collective intersectionality around what everyone is looking to see solve for. I mean, at the end of the day, when it comes to ad sales, revenue is clearly universally the understood critical need, but beyond that, what are some of the other things that are required? I think aside from that, the other upskill for me is really studying people. And when I say that, I don't mean that in a way of soliciting any sense of like I'm stalking, but I do really understand my subjects. What's their motivation? What's their fear? The other great thing about social media is that if you wanted to know everything about someone, you could at least put together enough nuggets to come in and never have a moment where you're like, I don't at least know the following. And so you understand their background, you understand some of the sensibilities that might drive their decision making. I think I've learned to listen more, speak less, understand how do I then trade on the currency in the room based on what those folks in the room need to see to be the win. And oftentimes it's not rooted in my KPIs and my objectives, quite the opposite, that I have to mute that for the purposes of making sure that I lead with what they need and what they want. And so a lot of times that's what I tell my teammates, which is, and the folks who are on my team, we are not going in and selling anything that we own. We do have priorities unequivocally, but we are going in and making sure that we are delivering against what they need. And we should know more about their brand and their portfolio than our brand and what we have. If we're really great experts, we should be ambassadors to their brands, but we just have a key card that opens the door here for us to work. The second thing that I would say to you is that, or third, wherever I am on the list, but the final thing for me by way of another skill has really been practicing the art of, for me to close the deal, for me to be able to make sure that the transaction comes to full fruition. My sales cycle could be anywhere from 6 months to like 30 days to a full year. Tenacity and a sense of patience around the deal and what that looks like. And while I have critical pressures to make sure we're driving revenue, I can recognize that a conversation that I'm having in February of this year leads to revenue in December of next year. That goes back to that relationship building in a sense of not just showing up when you need something, but sustaining continuity and contact. And more importantly, supporting the business in a way of saying, I've read about this and I know what's happening, but let me continue to tell you what I know can be of service to you. And again, that just sustains, it goes back to what we talked about earlier, that reputation of just how you deliver for someone, but more importantly, that you maintain a sense of being in service to the business and the goals. And then finally, what I would also say, we talked earlier at the beginning of the dialogue about layoffs and people have been impacted. It's so critical for me too, when it comes to relationship currency, or another skill that I built, is people move on and migrate beyond. You never know where they're going to show up. So just because someone is no longer in the same space with you does not mean they have to cease being a priority or someone with whom you're checking in with. And quite the opposite. I think it's often so critical that we maintain relationship capital at multiple places with multiple people, because you, again, you think about Angelina, you and I, our history and where we started, and like we've migrated on, you've obviously built this beautiful platform and this business and this operation and done great things. I moved on from where we first started working together, and yet we still have this relationship and have found benefit to continue to support each other in each of our respective endeavors. So it's critical, I think, even when people move on, that you maintain relationship engagement and continue to see how you can continue to be of service to each other.
That building of the relationships I've seen prove to be critical over and over as I've transitioned. And so really can't highlight that enough. Something else that I want to echo is that active listening piece. So especially in sales, a big part of what we do is business development as we're engaging with clients. And whether we're using it in a coaching exercise or even for ourselves, there is this acronym, WAIT. Why am I talking? Because you really want to be listening to the other side more than you're speaking. That's the best way to understand. So I'm glad that you called that out. The other piece about networking, though, is having community can help with resilience and over the course of your career and as things change and shift. So how have you used your community or used your network during a time where you really needed to be resilient?
That is a great question. And when I left my prior post, which was Viacom, now Paramount, and migrated over to the Oprah Winfrey Network, I moved into just a whole different realm of content narratives, in addition to marketing solutions and tools. And so I went from a place that I had been selling MTV for years. And so a very different audience than the audience that's watching perhaps Queen Sugar or Greenleaf or Ready to Love. And more importantly, I recently said this on a panel, I showed up very differently at work for the first time ever, because I had license to be unapologetically, or I felt the license to be unapologetically myself at work, bringing all of it, to the experience, since I was very much involved with understanding the subjects that were on the screen and the audiences with whom we were resonating with at home when they were watching the content, because I was part of the story as a Black woman. And so ultimately, I came over, and what I needed, Angelina, was truly my underground sisterhood. I say it was my sisterhood underground railroad of people and places and spaces that I could call and say, how do I help you and how do you help me? And right now, I'll never forget, we had in fact, we were joking earlier prior to the call, we were talking about D Nice, and this is well before the pandemic and his quarantine movement. But ultimately, we were having a big moment, and we were like, we need someone who's really going to bring some energy to the Super Soul experience. And it was through a relationship. Can we unlock that opportunity? He had always wanted to DJ at that point, had not for Miss Winfrey, so he did. And then in addition to that was like, I was tasked with how do we get the most perfect people in the room and the experience. And again, I'm only in the role less than 90 days. And so I'm thinking, but again, it was unlocking the relationships that I had and saying, here's an opportunity to be a part of something special and moving. And then that sustained really throughout my duration of working on the post at the Oprah Winfrey Network was relationships in spaces where it could be like, we were below ground. And when I say below ground, meaning no one knew the deals that we were making happen until they came to full fruition. But it took a lot of just planning and seeding and moving things differently, because sometimes budgets weren't there, or we had to create a way to find the right solution to solve for a critical KPI. But we continued to support each other, and that still exists for me by way of community. I'm flanked by no less than 100 women in different places and spaces who look like me, who are always ready and in position to say, how do I help? And like vice versa, they call, I pick up, and it's like, what do you need? And so I'm very blessed and fortunate in that way. And I think everyone needs sort of that between that kind of army, which I'm grateful to have, but then there's that board of directors who are the people that, you sit around the table and they give you the truth about what you need to do, but also can really be, again, key decision makers or folks of impact and influence in your trajectory.
Yes. Thank you for that. Floyd, I'd like to hear your take on that as well. Whether it's networking or other tools, how are you helping clients build that resilience that's needed in their careers?
Yeah, I do spend a lot of time talking, Angelina, about networking, and really trying to create this cadence of always developing your circle of influence, those people who can support you. And networking, we can talk about a lot of iterations of networking. It could be just having lunch with your director above your manager, and I talk a lot about that, and just really kind of build relationships beyond your manager. Or it could be just having those after-hour meetings and engagement, a little bit more about your personality, and to get them comfortable being with you, and really ingraining yourself in the culture of the organization, and really aligning your goals, your personal goals, with the goals of the organization. That's really important to really do that as well. So it's always a conversation that I have almost every session I have with the client is the networking part and how they're cultivating those relationships, and what are the goals for them to make sure that they get the alignment that we're looking for with their team, with their manager, and with those above them. So always thinking about that. And it's those who do it well seem to get great benefit from building their core team, as I call it, in their network, external and internal. And it's something that we always, like I said, we always coach around.
Yes. And, if anyone out there is intimidated by networking, or if that's challenging, I'm glad that you brought it up, that that's something that you have worked with clients on as a coach. I myself have to build habits and do pep talks and all of that when it comes to networking. I realized it was a different toll that it took on me as a business owner when I was in such heavy pitching mode, but it is a really critical skill. So thank you for sharing that. And I do want to share some stats, because we talked about professional development earlier. And as we're thinking about the future of work, 76% of millennials say professional development is essential for a strong company culture. And also 68% of employees prefer to learn and train on the job. So as you all are navigating your existing roles or looking for new ones, it's important to note that this is something that employers should be offering to you, or it's okay for you to request as well. I want to talk just about a few more things before we open it up to questions. So if you do have questions, we'll be taking those in just a second. But two last questions for you all before we open it up to the chat. So I'll start with Sheereen. As an executive vice president, an esteemed senior leader, are there particular leadership qualities you see or identify that make individuals more valuable to you, especially as things are shifting or feeling turbulent?
I would absolutely say the skill set of anticipating needs, and more importantly, those who deliver solutions as opposed to just problems or hurdles and stopgaps. and come to the table with, here's the challenge, here's the solutions, here's our optionality, what are the thoughts around it? That always is ever so favorable, because it demonstrates a different level of engagement and requirement of a senior leader, oftentimes, when said teammates know how to lead from that particular space. Resilience, as I mentioned, we have a cadence of a lot of change and challenge. And of course, to Floyd's earlier points, it produces anxiety and feelings of uncertainty, also just in the macro climate of what we've dealt with between social unrest, war, and potential strife, combined with like the health crisis and the pandemic. All those things created for a macro climate of just disruption that and continues to create for uncertainty for a lot of individuals. And so I think it's great when leaders, and I can see people on the team, create forum and a place for expression of that, but then a way to also compartmentalize that for the purposes of business and why we're all here, and how do we at the same time still continue to lead, but not lose sight of the human experience for all of the folks that are here in the right way. So empathetic leadership is so critical to me, and finding those who know how to do that and strike that balance, because that can be challenging. I've said it 1,000 times, but it's like, if you're, I'm dating myself, but it is very much just sort of like, show me the money. It's about the revenue at the end of the day when it comes to what I do, and how do we drive revenue, and how do we show impact to the bottom line in a very positive way. That's critical. But I would also say relationship capital and reputation and status that our partners and our teammates have with our clients is being another critical way in customer base. And then I would also say at times like this, the other thing that's just that is critical and necessary are winners and a winner spirit. And to me, that is really developed over time, but it is leaning in from a place that we have the right to win. And if you lean in from that place, how you show up looks really radically different than someone who leans in from a place of, I don't know if we can, I'm more concerned with the burden of the responsibility, as opposed to the absolute audacity of winning, because that feeling means you just show up with an unapologetic entitlement to win. And I believe that right now we should all feel that way in whatever it is that we do, or we're not in the right space, quite frankly. And you should get in that space where you're like, I'm unequivocally committed to doing what it takes, because I rightfully so should win, because I'm built for it. And so that to me is it. Teams of winners, those committed to revenue, empathetic leadership, and resiliency around that. And those who at the end of the day really want to win and want to be there. Those would be the things that I think are critical.
Those are going to be things that I put on my mantras and print out and have on my wall. That gave me chills. Lead like you have a right to win. I think especially as a person of color, sometimes you can feel like the wind can be knocked out of you, right? And so to keep that reminder really present is really, really, really important. And you gave me the alley-oop, the layup to the last question I had for Floyd before we take audience questions. And that is, Floyd, that winner's mindset. How do we create it? How do we maintain and create a positive and proactive mindset, which we know is needed for career resilience? What are some of the practices that individuals can adapt to cultivate this mindset?
Yeah, before I speak on that, I think I'm going to put that lead. You have a right to, what is it? You have a right to lead like you have a right to win. I think I'm going to put that on my T-shirt, Angelina, and wear that.
Give Sheereen her royalties.
I'll give you royalties for that. Yeah. But it's about, you mentioned about mindset. And I think that's really what it's all about when we're trying to coach clients and encourage them to really have this growth mindset, to really take control of what they can control. I call it, how do I put that? It's a recovery of choice is what I call it, Angelina. And it's all about just taking back what you have control of as it relates to your career trajectory, what you want to accomplish, the goals you can. And there's things that we can't control, but if we take back our recovery of choice of how we respond to things when they happen to us, then we can be better navigators of our own career, our own lives, and our own outcomes. So, the mindset is about, just really helping shift and reframing things as you talked about, reframing things like layoffs could be an opportunity for me to recalibrate my career and think about what I really want. And all these conversations about AI and everything, it's an opportunity for us to, to not be afraid of it, but to embrace these new technologies and lean into them and say, where are the gaps in maybe in my organization that AI can speak to, and just be creative and innovative and always be curious about that next thing. So I always coach around, the attitude of being curious, to being innovative, being creative in the space that you are in, and be a problem solver. As I think Sheereen talked about, managers want, direct reports who don't come to them with problems, but come to them with solutions. And I always talk about being the CEO of you. And that's about, you controlling your destination as much as you can and not letting the circumstances control that. And it's all about mindset and attitude, and all that encompasses that, which includes skill set, skill enhancement, staying on top of things, developing your skills, understanding your industry. All those things are what it takes to be the CEO of you. And so that's a great question. And I think that attitude will take, individual a long way.
That's really encouraging. And what immediately comes to mind as you say that is we have a workshop that we've done on resilience and growth mindset and research. There's data that we share in that talks about how these are skills that can be built, right? If you don't have a growth mindset right now, it's not the end of the world, because this is actually a muscle that you can develop. And I mentioned earlier, I've had an executive coach for now over a decade, and that's helped me to build that muscle. I think that's important to call out, because sometimes when layoffs happen or other unfortunate things in the job market, you can get really discouraged, and it's okay. That's a normal reaction, but just also recognizing that you can also build habits to lift yourself up out of that. I do want to take audience questions. If anyone wants to share, you can put them in the chat. I've also had 1 or 2 private message questions, so you're welcome to message me privately or put in the chat. I'm going to ask this first one. How do you align with your career? How do you align your career with your company's priorities and goals? And also, how do you figure out the priorities and goals? So I'll direct that to Sheereen.
Great question. For me, I mentioned this before. There's typically a unique set of priorities or goals and objectives that the company has laid forward, CEO led, or from some unique senior level sort of, here's our North Star and here's what we need to deliver in 2024. I'm just using that as the year. Then beyond that, it is really sitting with as many possible leaders and saying, what does a win look like for you in this year? What is the criteria associated with either this larger goal that we have, or more importantly, for your respective team, your outcomes, your KPIs, what are the things that you need to deliver? I think it's so necessary to do that listening and understand, because then when it comes to XYZ leader, if you understand, or you've made the time to get on their calendar to understand, or someone on their team, then it helps also support the strategy that Floyd and Angelina have been talking about how we show up, because then it really then our priorities get very much designed around what we need to solve for those greater opportunities. So it's the macro, the company, key leadership and what they're identifying, and then for the teams you work with, you support, or you have adjacent intersectionality with around outcomes, what does everybody's win look like? And that really does mean servicing those folks and treating them, I say I have internal clients and I have internal customers and external customers. And the people that I work with are also customers that I need to service, and I need to show up in a way of going, how am I supporting your business? Because if you win, I win. You want to win as well, and my win can't be at the expense of yours often. And even if it is at the expense, I need to do some type of unique engagement so that it feels like we've had negotiation around why that might happen. So that'd be my first thought, is really studying and understanding. And if you don't know, then you need to ask some folks, like, help me understand who I need to talk to get the clarity on those priorities, and then align yourself accordingly.
Thank you so much for that. And I got another private question in the chat. I'll just direct this to Floyd, and this will be the final question. How can coaching support you in becoming indispensable? and the person wanted to acknowledge that it is Black History Month. Happy Black History Month, everyone. And say, can you share specifically for Black talent why coaching is needed?
Okay, very good. Well, the first thing that I would say, Angelina, to the one who provided that question, is that coaching really, the foundation of coaching is really about self-awareness and growth. And coaching encourages this level of self awareness that involves, self reflection. And I always say to my clients, it's hard to see the picture where you're inside the picture frame. So what my vision is to always try to help my client come out of the picture, stand beside the client, and we look at the picture together, the scenario, the situation, to see if there's something missing as far as their perception or perspective about what really is going on. So that coaching can help create this level of awareness and that you might not have, because you don't have someone to walk through and navigate this process of self reflection, and we do that through inquiry. So for specifically for, you said something really important. For some ethnicities, we go even, we really go into a different level of transparency about what they're feeling or what might be going on. And there's a psychological safe space to do that, to really talk about things you might not be able to talk to your manager about or your reports about, because you might think that you'll be shunned, or you might be perceived as someone who's angry, or an angry person. And so we give you the space and time to really look at things from that perspective of being an African American or a person of color in a space, and really, delve into these feelings and emotions that people of color might be having, and these experiences they might be having that no one else can relate to, because they're not in that community. And so that's a great place and a great opportunity for you to come in and be transparent and be authentic, as Sheereen says, and be yourself and bring all of yourself to the conversation, so we can really get into some real conversation about what is that doing for you, what are those feelings causing you to, what kind of triggers they're causing, and how do we navigate those without being perceived as stereotypical angry Black person, whatever. So that's what I would say. And we talk about skill enhancement in coaching. When I talk about skill enhancement, I'm talking about these soft skills like conflict management and communication better, communicating better, and making strategic decisions by being more strategic thinker, emotional intelligence. These are the soft skills that move people from subject matter expert to leader of people, and help them move up the ladder as they go. So those are kind of things I would say.
Thank you so much, Floyd. We really appreciate that. Lost you a little bit about the end, but I think what I captured was, if you are especially a person of color that is dealing with spaces in which you don't feel safety every day at work, your coaching engagement can be a great place for that. And it immediately comes to mind our company, which we built with the intention of bringing together more certified coaches from a range of backgrounds. We have dozens of coaches that represent multiple identities, and we intentionally curated that for this very reason. So thank you to the participant for that question. And at this time, I have to say also our goodbyes and thank yous. This has been such a rich conversation. I have mantras. We have things to put on t-shirts and really work to do in terms of the growth that we want for ourselves. So I do want to thank Sheereen and Floyd for your wonderful contributions to today's discussion. You really hit on what was top of mind for so many of us. I hope you saw the energy in the chat. And I also just want to let you all know, if you are looking to engage with professional development resources for your company, or would like your company to support you in coaching, do please reach out to us, info@csuitecoach.com, and we can begin that conversation. Thank you, all of you, for being here. And I will now like to kick it back over to New York Urban League.
All right. Thank you so much, Angelina. Thank you, Floyd. Thank you, Sheereen. This was a phenomenal conversation. I definitely look forward to getting one of those t-shirts, Floyd, and we'll make sure to credit Sheereen. I also want to echo what Angelina shared, and professional development, career development, yes, is important. We encourage you to get the coaching support that you need. And also in terms of creating community, the New York Urban League has a digital community that we've created in order for us to connect with one another. And in the spirit of doing that, we are connecting with C-Suite Coach in order to do this on a bi-monthly basis. So we are going to bring you another conversation. And we'll be bringing you conversations throughout the year. But in the meantime, you can connect on nyulconnect.org, create a free profile, and we shall see you in 2 months.